In this presentation, we will generate, analyze, and export to Excel a comparative balance sheet within QuickBooks Online. Here we are in the free test drive file for Craig's Design and Landscaping. We're going to go on down to the reports down below. Now, when we're considering a comparative balance sheet, we're going to be comparing one period to another. You do have in the section down here under Business Overview a balance sheet comparison. So you can select that and start building from that component. However, you're still going to need to know the options in order to manipulate what that comparison period will be. What we're going to do is start from scratch. We're going to start with a standard balance sheet and then use the options in order to make it into a comparative balance sheet. So we're going to go into the balance sheet first then. I'm going to duplicate the screen as we have done in the past so that if we want to go back to some other resource, we'll have the actual report to the right and then the other screen to the left. So I'm going to right click on the tab up top. I'm going to duplicate that tab. And here is our balance sheet. Now what we're going to do is we want to make a comparative balance sheet. I'm going to make a comparative balance sheet comparing 2 months of data. I want to compare December and November of 2019. That's going to be our comparison. Now, so the question is then how do we do that? Remember, when we think about the balance sheet, we're thinking about a period in time, not a time frame. So it would be as of the end of November and, November 30th, and as of the end of December, side by side and a comparison. So one way we could think about doing it is, well, what if I was to change the date range up top to the full range that we want to see? If I was to say, all right, what if I made this 11/01/19, November 1st, 2019 to 12/31/19. And then what if we ran that report? What would that do? Well, that's going to give us as of December 31st, because remember, the date range doesn't do anything really for the balance sheet if you're just running a standard balance sheet. The only thing it does for you is if you were to go and zoom into any number on the balance sheet, it will then give you the activity for that date range, November and December, which is nice. But the balance sheet itself will only be displaying the final year of the period, whatever period you put in there, in this case, December 31st. So I'm going to go back to the report summary then and say, all right, now how do I do? I want November and then December to kind of show up here. Well, what if I went to the totals down here and we went to months? So now I'm going to say months on the totals, and then we'll run that report and see what we have then. Then it breaks it out for us. So that's one way you can do a nice little comparison where you have November and December. Notice it puts November on the left when you do this type of method, so you're reading from left to right. That's not always the case. In fact, many times people like to put the most current period on the left because then you're reading from relevance of data. Supposedly, you would think the most current data being the most relevant on the left and then reading the less relevant data on the right. So, but if you want to put it this way, from the older data to the newer data, this would work, and you'd have your balance sheet set up in this format. Now, this isn't the standard format that we would typically use because oftentimes we would also want to calculate the difference here, the change. So if you're using this months setup, then that's often going to be used if you're using more than a 2-period comparison. If you're using 3 periods, or you want to see 3 months in the quarter or something like that, then this would be a good method. If you're doing a side-by-side, period-by-period comparison, then you're often going to want another column that's going to be saying, I want to know the difference between those two. I want to know the change and possibly the percentage change as well. So let's go back to where we were then. I'm going to say, all right, well, what if we want to do that? Then I can go back up to the totals only. I'm going to run that report. I still have the date range covering these 2 months. And if I select this one, I'm going to say, well, I have these options here that has the previous period and the previous year. So what if I want to go to the previous period? I can try that, and I can put the range in here. But if you think about it, well, if I'm going to go to the previous period, then I want to fully define the current period, so then I could then say I want the previous period. So that means that instead of having the full date range being from November to December, we're going to just say it's going to be from December 1st, 12/01/19, and run that report. That doesn't change the report at all because it's still ending date 12/31 as far as the balance sheet. As long as the ending date is there, that's what the report will be running. But now that I have this period, I can then go down below and say, well, now I'd like to select the previous period. And this will work very similarly then to like a timing report, like the profit and loss or income statement. even though they're different in nature with a point in time and the timing, because we're basically using these date ranges for the month, and then I want the previous period. In this case, the previous month. Now, note when you use the previous period, because the months don't have the same date ranges, some months have more days in them than other months, then you have this basically customization where you could change the date ranges to be the full month, which is probably typically what you would want, right? You want to basically have a month-by-month comparison, even though some months have a few more days in it, or one more day or two more than the other months. All right, so we're going to start with that. We're going to say, okay, let's go ahead and run that report. And there we have our comparison. So now we have a similar type of comparison, but this time we have December on the left and November on the right, which may seem unusual when you first look at it, but it's actually more standard. It's kind of like actually the more normal type of comparison for the convention, because the most relevant data now is on the left. Now we want to say, okay, what if I want to have another column here that's going to show the change? I want to show the change. So then we can go back up top and say, let's see the change. So we'll select this item, and I'm just going to say I want the dollar change. So we'll pick up the dollar change, and then we'll run that report once again. So now we have the dollar change in there. So obviously the dollar change would simply be, if we pulled out the trusty calculator here, we're going to say it's going to be the one period minus the other period, or the 1201 minus the 3518.87 for the cash. There's the dollar change. The dollar change is obviously really nice for us to make a comparison, but it sometimes it's actually gives us more information if we had a percentage change, especially if we're going to be comparing or benchmarking to other types of industries. For example, if we had a design company and we're trying to compare to another landscaping company that's a really well-established, well-run landscaping company, but which is much larger than we are, we can't really compare the dollar amounts to them, but we can compare the percentage amounts. And that's going to be the same kind of concept that you would have if you were basically, comparing baseball stats or something like that. If someone had more at-bats than the other person, how do you compare the two? You got to use ratios. So ratios are actually really important, when you do that kind of benchmarking. So how do we get the percentage in there? I'm going to select this again. We're going to say now we want the percentage change. So I'll take the percentage change and then run the report once again. Now we have the percentage change. Now what does the percentage change mean? You're going to take the dollar change that we had, which was the 2317.87 for cash, divided by the previous period, not the current period, but the previous period. So the prior period is going to be this 3518.87. So you have the 68.8%, or if I move the decimal point 2 places to the right, which is about, 65.8, which is about 65.87%, right? And you could do this all the way down. You can compare these down. You're going to take the change. The change here, for example, is 1375.37 divided by the previous period, which in this case is the 687.15. Let me do that one more time. We've got the change is the 1375.37 divided by the 687.15. Yeah, that's correct. And then I move it 2 places over. That's a 200% change, 200.16. So notice that the data input in this system has a big change from one period to the other. Might not always be the case. It just depends on how established the company is. If your company is pretty standardized at this point in time, you would expect the changes not to fluctuate a lot. And the ones that do, obviously, if you saw a 200% change, you want to go into that and say, okay, why is that there? It may be that you just broke something out. It may be that you basically had 2 accounts or 1 account in the past, and now you wanted more detail, so now have 2 accounts or something like that, which means that the new account would have new information in it in the current period that wasn't there in the prior period. So what these numbers do for you is they give you some idea of more what you want to look into in more detail. And a common method would be to take these changes and see any changes over a certain amount, say 10% or 20% or something, and dig more deeper into it. Say, okay, can I explain why there's this 10 or 20% difference? And then if you compare to or benchmark to another company, then you want to benchmark against their differences, see what their change percentages are. And you could do that even if they have a much larger or smaller dollar amount than you do. You could do a similar comparison with the percentage changes. Now, oftentimes you do this comparison with the performance reports a lot, because that's performance, just like batting averages is our performance, meaning the profit and loss and income statement. So this is the balance sheet where we stand at a particular point in time. So we will do the same kind of analysis on the profit and loss as well. So then we might want to do some more kind of formatting to this. For example, we may not need the pennies. I'm going to make the negative numbers, I'm going to put them in brackets. So let's do that first. I'm going to go up to the Customize Reports up top. And let's say that we want to say that we don't want the pennies. I'm going to remove the cents. And then I'm going to put the negative numbers in brackets, and I'm actually going to make them red as well. So that's what we'll do first. And if I run that report, then that kind of gives it a little bit more customization. So we see that. And then we're probably going to want to change the balance sheet because now we've kind of changed it to a comparative balance sheet. So then we might want to go up top and say, all right, I need to change the name. Now you could do that right here, or you could go back into the customize fields as well. And we're looking at the header and footer field. And now we have a comparative balance sheet. So we'd say something like comparative balance sheet. And then we would have that. So there we have that. Also note that you can't really change the as of period down here. It's not in the change options there. And you would like to possibly say it's going to be as of a two-month time period, right? You've got November and December. So you could go up to the customize reports and go down and say, I'd like to, in the headers and footers, the report period, just simply remove it. And now you don't have the report period and it's listed down here in the actual report. Now, the other thing we can do is we'll export this to Excel. And if you wanted to add a report period of a custom nature in that format too, you can do that as well. Next thing we want to take a look at is the footer. The footer down below. Oftentimes I like to remove the footer. So I'm going to go back up top and say, let's get rid of the footer. I'm going to go to the customized reports up top again. And the date prepared, the time prepared, and the report basis. I'm going to say we don't need those items. I'm going to run that report. We don't even need to hit run. We just go down. Okay, those have been eliminated. So that looks pretty good. So everything's looking pretty clean now. So once you have everything set up on your report the way you like it, we're going to go down and say, it looks pretty good. Then you might want to save this type of report. You might want to then save as a custom report. So save as a custom report, and then you can put it into a custom location. If you so choose, you can add a group here. I'm just going to go ahead and say save for now. And that way you could basically make another comparative balance sheet without having to do all the formatting that we've done here. So have to do some formatting, changing the dates and whatnot, but it could reduce the amount of formatting necessary. Now what we're going to do, remember, is that typically you would have to then send this stuff out, which would be the email or printing it if you're going to give it to someone, or print it as a PDF. What we're going to do is save it as an Excel file and print it as a PDF. So those are the two methods that I would recommend basically doing. And I'm going to do that. We're going to do this for each report we're going to make in this section, so we can consider how we would group these reports up and possibly give them to someone. Now, you probably wouldn't be given like 3 different balance sheets, which is what we're going to focus on, but you would often be giving multiple reports at one time. So this will be practice for us to think about how can we group these reports together, and we'll just do this with each section and just basically group these reports together. So one way we could do that is we can print it as a PDF. Now, we do have the PDF option here to export as a PDF, but I'm going to keep on using that cute PDF printer because I think it's something that I want to just remind you of that is an option for you, and we're going to use it here and in Excel, and it's useful to basically just be aware of. So I'm going to print it to Excel, and there it is, and then I'm going to go ahead and print. Not to Excel, I'm going to print it to the cute PDF printer. And so now I'm printing it, but it's going to that cute PDF printer we talked about in a prior presentation. I would recommend having some type of PDF printer available. And then we're going to say print it, and then I'm going to locate where I want to put it. So now I've created a folder called course data, and the last stuff I put in the course overview, and then now I'm going to put this in 2. I'm just going to label it 2, like section 2, and then it's going to be balance sheet because that's what we're focusing on in section 2. Obviously, if you're in practice, you want to label your information probably by clients, and then within the clients probably by date. You may want to have a section, a separate folder for each year, and break it out by each year. And then you may even want to be putting the dates in front of the name down below of the report, because that'll help it to sort by date. So you may want to have the date down here. You may even want the year and then the month and then the day when you sort the date, because then it'll sort, in order by date. Okay, so we're gonna have, this is gonna be the comparative balance sheet. So I'm gonna put this in the balance sheet folder, and I'm gonna call this a comparative balance sheet. Comparative balance sheet, and I'll just say 1231. And like I say, you may want to put that 1231 basically at the beginning. And if it's in a year's folder, if you put all those stuff in the same year, then you can have the date, the year at the end of this. If you have all your stuff in one folder without breaking it out by 2 folders by year, then you may want the year first, year, and then month, and then day, because then it'll sort by year and month and then day. So in any case, we're going to then say save. And so that's one way we're going to save it. Now, that PDF file, then we can attach it to an email or something like that. But we're going to make multiple different reports and think about how we can attach multiple different reports. Therefore, I'm also going to export it. I'm going to export it as an Excel file. Let's export it as an Excel file. This is really useful because oftentimes the balance sheet is kind of your building blocks that you may want to start and do some other type of report analysis on. You may want to put this information into Excel and then manipulate it in some way for some other type of purpose, some other type of report that you're making. And this is also something that we're going to use to combine all of our balance sheet reports together so that we can have another option on how we can send out this balance sheet report in a way that can be kind of impressive to other people. You know, we can put all the reports into one PDF file. So I want to practice doing that as we go through these sections, as we print these reports. So I'm going to go ahead and save this then. I'm going to say File, Save As. I'm going to browse to say where I want to put it here. I'm going to put it into our balance sheet folder, and then I'm going to basically name it, and I'm just going to name it balance sheet. These are going to be balance sheet reports. Balance sheet reports. And we're going to have multiple reports that we're going to put in here on this file ultimately after we start after next presentations when we start adding more reports. Now, once we add multiple reports, we'll start to save this as a PDF file. Now, there's nothing new here because we only have this one data, but what you could do now, note that you could put in the header, like you could copy the formatting of this header and say, I'm going to put that formatting down here. And then you could say, as of November and December 2019, right? Or something like that. So we can add back in basically that line item that we removed in terms of the dates up top, even though the dates are down here. Again, you can adjust the formatting down here if you so choose as well. So those are some things you can do. We're also going to add more reports down below so that we can print them all on one PDF file as we've seen in a prior presentation. So what we'll do once we're done with that, I'm going to do it on each section, is say print, not save as. And then we're going to be using that cute PDF printer. If there was more than one tab, like there will be shortly, we're going to print the entire workbook, not just the one page. Now also note that this report's a little long here. It's actually 4 pages. Notice it's cutting off that last column. So we're going to have to do a little bit of formatting, and that's another thing you can do within Excel that might be a little bit easier sometimes. I'm going to go back here and notice the printing screen is going to cut it off right there. That's what that dotted line is. Before you print it, it's often useful to go to the page layout tab, which I do. I go on the bottom here, page layout, and you can see this screen will then show you that other screen where the page break will be. And then if I go back to the prior screen, it'll then add that dotted line, just like we did with the printing option. Now you can go back in here and say, okay, how can I fix this? You'd like to fix this without basically minimizing the text, because then it won't line up with other text that's in there. So if you could do this with formatting, such as basically possibly making this cell a little smaller, I'm going to put my cursor right in between, left click and make this cell a little bit smaller. And there, now it popped over to being within the range. I don't care so much that it's over a page long. You could try to get it all on one page in that format as well. I just don't want it 2 pages wide typically, because that's a problem for if you're trying to read a report and you got to tape it together, right? So I'm going to go ahead and try this again. Then I'm going to save this as it is. I'm going to go to the File tab. We're then going to print again. And once again, the entire workbook, if there were multiple workbooks, now we only have the 2 pages here, so that looks good. I'm going to print it to the Qt PDF printer, which will basically save it as a PDF. So there it is, and I'm just going to call it Balance Sheet Reports. So I'm going to say Save, And there we have that. Now, when we make future balance sheet reports, we're going to basically save them, and we're going to show how we can make multiple tabs with this one file as we did in a prior presentation, and then practice basically different formats of making a PDF file with multiple reports on it from the Excel worksheets.